Hey you guys, what's up? In today's video, I'm going to be trying out the brand new Colourpop Orchid collection. I'm super excited to show you guys today's video. I will be showing you guys swatches and close-ups of everything that comes in this collection. We'll be doing lip swatches. I'm going to be creating this eye look for you guys. I'm also going to be comparing the brand new Orchid eyeshadow palette next to some other similar Colourpop palettes to help you guys decide whether or not you want to pick this one up. So I hope you guys are all excited about today's video. If you are, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, let's go ahead and go through everything that comes in this collection. I'm going to be showing you guys close-ups and swatches. So first up in the collection, we have the Orchid You Not eyeshadow palette, and can I just say how obsessed I am with this packaging? This packaging is so beautiful. This is a 9-pan eyeshadow palette. I will say though that I feel like there was a little bit of a missed opportunity here. I think that they should have done the actual palette packaging as the outer packaging. I'm not the biggest fan of these little like plastic ones like this. I really like my palettes, like my High Tide palette and Fine Feathered, that have the same packaging as like the outer box like this, that is like super beautiful. So this is a beautiful purple toned palette, and I can already tell that I'm really going to like this color story. The metallics in here look stunning, and then all of the matte shades in here are just like right up my alley. This is a really nice palette for the fall. So let's go ahead and do some swatches. So first up we have the shade Pretty One. I already know that I'm going to love this shade. Like, are you kidding me? It's a really pretty kind of like light silvery lavender shade. Next we have Rebloom. Of All Purple. That is a beautiful like duochrome shade. Moth. OMG. That one's a little bit more of like a sheer shimmery shade. I feel like there's a little bit more like glitter in this one. Next we have Ada. Buddies. That one swatched very nicely. Seedling. And the last shade is called Nuh-uh. Alright, so here are all of the shades in the eyeshadow palette. I think this is a beautiful color story. I really like that this is a pretty much like medium to deep toned palette. Also for the eyes in this collection, we have 3 shades of their color sticks. First up, we have the shade You Grow Girl. Next is Venus Slipper. Ooh, that's really pretty. And the last shade is called Pressed. Ooh, also really pretty. So we have 1 matte, and then it looks like 2 metallic shades. Those are really pretty. Next up in the collection, we have this Soul Body Shimmering Body Powder, and this is in the shade Wild Orchid. So this is a really pretty, it almost looks like a duochrome, kind of purpley pink with some gold glitter in it. This smells amazing. I love the scent of the Soul Body highlighters, and there it is. It's a little bit deep for my skin tone, but honestly this shade is so stunning. Then we also have 2 shades of their pressed powder blush. First up is Just My Pluck. I am really excited to see these on the cheeks. Okay, that did not swatch the best, but that's okay. I don't expect it to be super pigmented since it's a blush, but I'm really curious to see that on the cheeks. And then we also have the shade called Potted. So there are the 2 blush shades. And lastly, we have 3 shades of their lippy sticks. First up is the shade called Orchis, and this one is a matte. Then we have the shade Dancing Lady. This is also a matte. I believe they are all mattes in this collection. Ooh, that one's also really pretty. And lastly, we have the shade Heavy Petal. So there are all 3 of the lip shades. I love all 3 of those. They're perfect for the fall. So now that you guys have seen everything, let's go ahead and move on to the demo part of the video. We're going to try out the cheek products, create this eye look, and then also do some lip swatches. Alright, so first up we're going to try out all of the cheek products. So we have the 2 blush shades. I'm going to apply 1 on each side of the face, and then we also have the highlighter. I might have to mix the blushes together because one's a little bit deep for my skin tone, but we're going to go ahead and try those out first. So first up is the shade Just My Pluck, which is the lighter one, and I'm just gonna start tapping this on the cheeks. I feel like I don't have a blush shade like this. It's a very kind of like purpley blush, which is not something I would normally go for, but it actually does look really pretty. This shade is perfect for like fair to light skin tones. So here is that shade, very pretty, I like that a lot. Now we're gonna try the shade Potted, which I know already is going to be too deep for me, but I do also want to show you guys this shade, so I'm just gonna go in really lightly with this. I thought I had only a little bit on the brush, but I guess that was more pigmented than I thought. All right, so with lots of blending and a light hand, I can definitely make this one work. I think that they would look really nice mixed together. But definitely the lighter shade is better, obviously, for my skin tone. But I actually really like the shade of the deeper one, but I went in a little too heavy-handed. I thought I only picked up a little bit. That was actually a lot more pigmented than I was expecting. I'm going to grab some of the lighter shade and just kind of use that to blend on top. And the darker one's still on my brush a little bit, so I'm just gonna kind of make my cheeks a little bit more even. So there's them kind of mixed together. So next up we have the Soul Body Highlighter. So I think I'm first gonna just show you guys how this looks, like maybe kind of closer to the blush area. This will definitely be more of a blush topper for me personally, but I feel like this will be very, very pretty on medium to deep skin tones. So hopefully you guys can tell it's adding a very nice glow to the blush. So if you are pretty fair like me, you can definitely use this as a blush topper. I'm gonna also take a little bit of a lighter highlight and kind of mix those together just to highlight my cheekbones a little more. Oh yeah, that's really pretty with a lighter shade mixed in. All right, so those are all of the face products that we're gonna try. Now we're gonna move on to the eyes. So moving over into the Orchid You Not palette, I'm first gonna take this shade right here, and we're gonna do my typical eye look I do whenever I review palettes, just because it's easy for me to tell if I like a palette doing this type of look. So I'm going to map out the shape of my crease. I feel like I say the same thing in every single eyeshadow palette review video, but this is gonna look crazy until the end. But based on my first impression, the pigmentation of this shade is really good. So we definitely don't wanna go too high with this shade. We're gonna blend some other shades above this one, but this is gonna be kind of like the very edge of my cut crease area. Next, I'm gonna take the shade called Moth, and I'm just going to like very tightly blend this along the edges of the first shade. This is just going to diffuse the edges of the deepest shade. And once I don't really have like much product left on the brush, I'm gonna start blending a little bit upwards. Now I'm going to pick up the shade Rebloom, and I'm going to have to go in with this shade pretty lightly because I really need to kind of diffuse this shade out, and I'm just going to start blending this right above the last shade that I put down. So now I'm going to take all of the same shades that I used in my crease, starting with the deepest shade, and I'm just going to kind of pack them along the lower lash line, keeping the darkest shade the closest, and I'm going to kind of connect it to my outer corner over here. Then I'm going to take the shade Moth, which was the middle shade in my crease, and I'm just going to start kind of blending this right over top of the deepest shade. With this one, I will go just a little bit lower. Then I'm going to take the lightest shade from my crease, and I'm just going to use this to blend out both of those shades. Alright, so off camera I went ahead and cut my crease. It doesn't have to be perfect right now because we're going to kind of blend after we put down the lid shade. So now we're going to jump into the metallics in this palette, which I'm so excited to try. So first up, I'm going to take the shade Pretty One. I am definitely most excited about this shade, and I'm just going to blend this back from my inner corner. This is seriously such a pretty shade. I love it. So there was pretty much no fallout with all of the mattes. There definitely is some fallout with that first shimmer shade. Now I'm going to take the shade called Seedling, and I'm going to apply this right on the outer edge. And lastly, I'm going to take Of All Purple, and I'm going to put this down the center of my lid. This is such a pretty duochrome shade, and I'm just going to try and kind of blend the edges of each shimmer shade together so they kind of fade nicely into each other. So I went ahead and added some mascara, and as I was doing that, I realized that we forgot to try the color Stix. I feel like I do that in every video just because I never really use like products like this as an eyeshadow base, but I was reading some reviews on these, and I've seen some people use these as an eyeliner in the waterline, so we might try that. I kind of smashed all of the tips of these on accident, so now I'm like wondering how I'm supposed to put this in my waterline, but we're gonna just gently try it. Okay, so that actually worked. This is the shade Pressed, which is a metallic. I mean, that's pretty creamy. I don't know if it's gonna go anywhere or not, but it is a pretty shade. So the last thing we need to try out are the lippy sticks, and then after that, I'm going to show you guys the eyeshadow palette compared to some other Colourpop palettes. So if you guys have some other similar palettes, you can see whether or not you want to pick this one up based on this one next to the other one. So we're going to go ahead and do some lip swatches of the lippy sticks. So first up is the deepest shade called Orchid. All right, not my best lip swatch. These can sometimes be a little bit tricky to get really precise, but this shade is such a beautiful shade for the fall. I actually am really excited to have this in my collection. It's a very like deep kind of vampy purple shade, and I love it. Next up, we have the shade called Dancing Lady. This shade is pretty similar to the last one, but to me it's more of a berry and less of a purple. All right, so here is this shade. I love this one as well. I love all three of these shades. This one is the Matte X, so it's a little bit more of a dry formula. It's definitely not as comfortable on the lips, but I will say that this one applies easier because it has a drier formula. It also makes your lips look very smooth, even though it is a drier formula, which is kind of weird. So yeah, I really like the way this one looks, but I can tell it would kind of bother me during the day because my lips do feel pretty dry. And lastly, we have Heavy Petal. All right, so here is that shade, not my best lip swatch. I love the Colourpop Lippy Sticks, and I was so excited that they put them in this collection, but I have such a hard time applying these without using like a little brush, and as you guys can see, it's still not very precise. I love the formula of these, but they can be a little bit tricky to get like very sharp and precise, especially with the darker shades like this. Like all three of these shades were darker shades, so sorry if my lip swatches were like super crazy. So yeah, I really like all of the lip shades. Now we're gonna go ahead and compare this palette to some other Colourpop palettes. So I went ahead and just grabbed a bunch of Colourpop palettes that I thought had any kind of shade that was even remotely similar to something in this palette. So we're probably gonna start with the palettes that are the least like closest to the new palette, but I did want to show them anyway because there are a few shades in these that are kind of similar. We're gonna start with Wine and Only. So I went ahead and grabbed this one just because there are a few shades that are a little bit similar. Like the bottom left shade in the Wine and Only is kind of similar to the shade Moth in the Orchid palette. And then this shade up here has a little bit of similarities to one of the shades in the Orchid You Not palette as well. So here are both of these side by side. Next, I'm gonna show you Cherry Crush. There's really only like one shade that's even remotely similar between these two palettes, and it's this bottom left corner over here, so that is why I wanted to show you these two palettes side by side. Next, I'm going to show you Fine Feathered. Fine Feathered does have some purple shades in it, like this bottom corner is very similar to the bottom right in the Orchid palette. That's why I wanted to show these side by side. Next up we have Making Mauves, and here are these side by side. I actually really like Making Mauves, but looking at these together, the Orchid palette just looks so much better with all of the deep shades. I feel like it's a little bit more vibrant. So yeah, there are those palettes next to each other. Then we have Flutter By, which is another kind of purpley mauve palette. And there are also some shades that are kind of similar between both of these palettes, but once again, the Orchid palette is just overall a deeper palette and is a little bit more vibrant than the Flutter By palette, but there are some shades that are pretty similar between these two palettes. And then the last palette we're going to compare side by side is the Menage a Moi palette. So as you guys can see, there are some shades that are similar as well between these two palettes, but they are still slightly different. I feel like if you have Menage a Moi, you probably don't need the Orchid palette, but there are some shades in this palette that I really like this top purple shade, that are not in Menage a Moi. So I hope those comparisons were helpful for you guys if you're trying to decide whether or not you want this palette. I feel like the Orchid palette is just like the perfect purpley fall time palette. As you can see, we have a really deep kind of fall look going on here, which I don't really have all of the shades that are in this palette in any of my other ones. So I'm actually really glad that I have this palette in my collection now. I think this is a really beautiful palette. I feel like this one is really good for like medium to deep skin tones. You have all of the shades that you would need to create a look. I just feel like this is such a beautiful palette, and I love purples. I'm starting to get more into purpley shades, so I'm really happy to have this. And yeah, I just feel like overall this is a really good 9-pan palette from Colourpop. My only thing was I wish they would have kept like the nice packaging from the outer box like they did on Fine Feathered. I just don't really like the plastic type palettes like this. I much prefer this type of palette. I think it looks a lot better. So I would definitely give this palette a thumbs up. I think the look turned out really nice. All of the shades performed beautifully, which I knew they would because I love Colourpop's eyeshadows. And then I also really love the lippy sticks. I just wish these were easier to apply like on the edges to get like a nice sharp look, but I love the formula of these. I definitely prefer the matte over the matte X. I feel like the matte X is just a little bit too drying for my taste. And then I didn't really try the color sticks. These are just a product that I don't typically use, so these I could have definitely done without. I do think it looks nice in the waterline, but I almost feel like it's a little bit too creamy to use in the waterline. It's like kind of getting on my contacts, so I'm not sure if that's intended to be used in the waterline. I just saw people reviewing that they did try it out in the waterline and it worked, but for me personally, just a little bit too creamy for the waterline. And then I did like both of the blush shades. I like that we have a blush for medium to deep skin tones, and then we also have a blush shade that'll work for fair to light skin tones. I don't have any blush shades like this in my collection, so I'm excited to have both of these. And then I also thought the highlighter was beautiful. It is a little bit too deep for my skin tone, but as a blush shopper, I think it looks beautiful, and I could even use this as an eyeshadow. So that is everything that comes in the new Orchid collection. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video. Let me know if you guys plan on picking anything up in the comments down below. So yeah, if you guys did enjoy today's video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Also, make sure you guys have your notifications turned on. That way you don't miss out on any of my future videos. All you have to do is click the bell next to the subscribe button, and then you'll receive a notification every time I upload a new video. And I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching.